All right, we're live and we're rolling. Welcome back to The Real Venture. If you're interested in learning about new business trends, starting your own business, or learning from other successful entrepreneurs, The Real Venture is the place for you. So welcome. I'm your co-host, Peyton Truitt, joined as always by Luke. Luke, how are we doing today?
Pretty good, Peyton. Thanks for asking. I'm excited for what we're going to be talking about. And, it's been pretty sweet seeing kind of the response from a lot of people on our old episodes. We'll be sure to follow up with you all on all your questions and whatnot. But Peyton, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're talking about the real estate market. So without further ado, let's just get into the conversation.
Yeah. And so, obviously what Peyton and I are working on outside of the podcast is a little real estate venture. We've been looking around at a lot of properties that we think would be interesting to invest in, to spend some time working on and, hopefully taking care of long term. But, it's a little bit scary looking at some of these numbers. They're, we're talking like $500,000-$600,000 homes at the cheapest. And so, we're thinking, is this a good time to be buying if everything just keeps going up and it's continuing to get out of our price range? And so Peyton and I have been looking into this, but Peyton, is this a bubble? That's kind of like the big thing that you and I have been talking about, but what's your take?
So to be completely honest, I actually think that 2021 is going to be a great time for us, to start buying our houses and starting our real estate business. And I think it's a good time for everybody else because, to be completely honest, I don't think that there's a bubble. And in order for us to break down why we don't think there's going to be a bubble, we need to understand why there's even the thought or the fear of a bubble right now. And big shocker, that's going to trace back to COVID. So, one of the most important things to understand here is, these global pandemics, great recessions, all of these, external economic factors. First it starts off with the stock market and things happen there. People freak out. And, those stock bubbles are relatively short. And I say relatively in terms of like American history, right? They're like these short little clips. The housing bubbles and recessions are a little bit of a different story. And I think that we all, are familiar with what happened in 2008, which was the most recent housing bubble. And, that happened for a multitude of different reasons. And it started a lot with like loans and mortgages. And that's kind of an area that people are freaking out on now. So Luke, why has COVID led to this financial fear when it comes to the housing market?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you started on part of that with the reference back to like the Great Recession and things like that, right? Like that recession was very, very different, especially on the housing front, because from a perspective of why the recession happened in the first place, I think that obviously it was completely different. And the first Great Recession was caused by housing. And so when we saw, kind of huge drop and huge rise in foreclosures, huge drop in housing prices, that was mostly due to the fact that recession was caused by a bunch of people getting mortgages that shouldn't have been getting mortgages. This one, obviously a lot different. The main cause of the recession was the fact that, half the economy was completely shut down. People who were normally doing work couldn't do that work. And so they're just not getting the income that they were used to getting. And so when you think about mortgages, right, that's obviously a huge chunk of your income. And so when most of your income dries up, it's going to be hard to pay that back. So it wouldn't have been a surprise if we saw a huge increase in foreclosures like we did back in 2008, but we didn't. So we actually the opposite, right? Prices have just kept going up. People are staying in their homes, and there's a ton of reasons for that. And just to kind of quickly overview all of those, we had very low interest rates that have been caused by the Fed cutting interest rates back in March of 2020. We had, the mortgage forbearance rules that were put into place at the start of all of this that are still in effect. We had the fact that a lot of companies aren't forcing people to relocate at all. You can do your job from wherever. So a lot of people are staying put, as well as now the freedom to move wherever you want to move, and you can work from wherever. And so people go into these, safe cities. They're going to cities that are close to nature, whatever the case may be. But Peyton, where do you want to start with all that? What's worth drilling into right now?
Let's start with the low interest rates. So, everybody, and their brother wants to have the lowest rate possible. And, for a lot of people, they might not realize the magnitude of difference between a 2 and a 3% mortgage rate. And, we got to think about it. If you have a $500,000 house and there is a 1% difference, that mortgage payment over the course of 30 years, which is the traditional loan term, that number adds up pretty quickly, and it results in a lot of interest. And obviously that's all on top of the principal of the actual house. So it can be a huge factor. So when, interest rates are lower like they are right now, it's a really exciting time, but it kind of freaks people out. So, Luke, why has that price, fluctuated to the point it's at today?
Yeah, and I mean, I think that the most important thing to cover with that is why interest rates would drop in general. Like why is that a trait of a recession? And it kind of all ties back to the Federal Reserve, whose primary job is to make sure that people have jobs and money's not going too crazy, inflation rate. And so when a recession like this happens, the Federal Reserve sees that one of their main monetary policy tools being the interest rate in order to facilitate economic activity. The lower you make the interest rates in the country, the easier it is for people to get money, to borrow money in order to do things, whether that's spend, invest, whatever the case may be. And so the one tool that the Federal Reserve has is the federal funds rate. So what they did is they slashed that to zero. When they did that, it trickles down to kind of all the other interest rates that exist. So that's like your credit card interest rate, the rate at which maybe you're saving at, the rate at which you can get car loans, especially mortgages. And so we saw that just right away in March of last year start to trickle down. And it wasn't immediate. It's not a direct one-to-one thing, but it slowly happens over time as the banks are able to get money for cheaper. People are able to get money from the banks for cheaper. And so we saw all of that happen over the course of last year. Mortgage rates continued to fall. It was, at one point at the end of 2018, it was like 4.5% for a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. By the end of 2020, it was 2.5%. And so essentially what that means for all of us who are looking to buy homes and things like that is, you are exactly like Peyton said, you're looking at a much lower total amount of money that you're going to have to pay on that initial upfront price than you normally would. And so what that leads to and why that's led to a huge increase in housing prices is you look at a $500,000 home, and instead of paying, $300,000 in interest over the course of that loan, you're going to only pay 200,000. And so for a lot of people, it's like, well, if I'm going to buy a home, now's the time. And that's led to a huge increase in the demand for housing. And so that's that's a huge contributor to this.
And
That being
and
said,
that right
yeah,
there,
sorry.
no, exactly. And that right there is a huge contributor to the increase in demand. But the next area that, we got to talk about with the mortgage forbearance is a huge reason why the supply is staying so low.
Yeah. And no, and right, and this all goes back to Econ 101 or whatever, right? Supply and demand. If demand, shoots up, housing prices or prices are going to shoot up with it. And if supply drops a lot, prices are going to shoot up just as much just because there's just so much less to go around. And so, Peyton, what's going on? Like, why is supply dropping as well?
So supply is dropping because people simply aren't selling their houses, right? So there's a multitude of different reasons, and this is the culmination of the 4 points that Luke and I started with. So first, mortgage forbearance, right? There are people who are kind of given a grace period. They don't have to pay their mortgages right at this point in time for whatever their extended deal is with their loan officers. And basically what that's leading to is they're able to use their finances to pay for other things. So they're not having to pay their mortgage. Therefore, there's no reason for them to sell their house, downgrade, whatever the case may be, because, they don't have to make any payments. So they're staying put. That also tied in with, the whole new work from home culture. You can pretty much live anywhere. So a lot of people are just continuing to live where they are. They might be out in the suburbs of a big city, but there's no reason for them to move because they can do all their work from their computer, like we can right here. And then, the last reason is, for the people that live in these fun, attractive cities like Austin and Denver and Boise, Idaho, and places like that. Boise, Idaho, for real. It's like one of the fastest growing metros in the United States, and for many other reasons that we're talking about here. But people who already live here, they're not going to go anywhere else. So it just completely tarnishes the available supply. And then, these attractive cities, the increase in demand, and, now we're getting the fear of the housing bubble, quote unquote.
Yeah, so let's drill into some of those. So like why do those specific things lead to a change in supply. So like starting with the mortgage forbearance thing, what are those numbers looking like? Like in a given year, let's say about half a percent of homes are foreclosed on. So that's looking at something like a million almost homes in the U.S. get foreclosed on. And essentially, what happened in 2020 was almost all of those million homes that would normally be shut down are not. So those all those million homes are stuck up, and somebody who would have normally foreclosed is able to kind of sit on that for a little longer, and that's going to continue until June 30th, at least as of now. And so a big problem there is not only do you have those people not foreclosing, but you have other people who are maybe on the fence about keeping the home they would have sold it otherwise, who are just like, I'm going to hold on to C now because I got an extra year.
This is kind of
So
just
we had
taking out the uncertainty, which is something that fuels the housing market, right? People who are in between jobs, like normally they'd be selling their house or, struggling to make payments, they'd sell their
yeah,
house and their downgrade. Just none of that is happening right now, or at least for the most part.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, at one point last year, you had 5 million people, 5 million houses that were locked up in this forbearance, right? So that's 5 million people who weren't making their mortgage payments that in a normal year could have foreclosed, right? And so now we've had a year of kind of that bottling up, and then on June 30th, it looks like that is going um, to end up kind of like well, it's going to expire, but it's going to end up kind of like bubbling over, I guess is the word I'm looking for. But and when that happens, I think it's going to be interesting to see if people who were in forbearance are now able to make those payments. That's fine, but if they're not, there's going to be a lot of foreclosures, and in that regard, it's going to be a big depressant on the housing prices, increase supply, right? More people are out
Yep.
there, but that's going to lead to potential bubble burst if that ends up being the case.
So let's, we just kind of like laid the foundation of what's going on, at the United States level. Let's drill into a specific scenario as in a city. And today we're going to use Austin, Texas. For a couple different reasons. One, I live here, so I'm very familiar with it. But two, it is one of the hottest and fastest growing metros in the United States because it is an economically safe city, and we'll get into that a little bit more in depth. But let's talk about the Austin housing market specifically. So just to kind of set the stage here, every single day there are 169 new people that move to Austin. And that number may not seem like super big, but every single day that many new additions are coming in. I mean, that's 169 potential people that need housing every single day. Ergo, the supply is way down, the demand is really high up, and now everybody's freaking out that there's going to be an Austin housing bubble.
Yeah, and so like why is Austin like drawing in all these people, like 169 new people a day, right? That's I don't know what that is magnitude wise compared to other cities, but it's got to be a lot.
Yeah.
What
So
is what's keeping people
there
coming?
there's a couple different reasons. One, like cities like Austin, Denver, there's a lot to do. There are outside nature activities, good climates. Denver more in the summer. Austin has a pretty mild climate all year round. And many of the other cities in the South, and Texas, Charlotte is another city that's growing really fast. So there's some attractive nature-based things that are coming in, but then there are also a lot of great job opportunities, right? Austin, Silicon Hills, every single tech company imaginable is moving their headquarters to Austin. And that ties into a lot of corporate tax structure. And in Texas, there is no income tax, both corporate and personal. So something that is extremely attractive. And actually, Texas actually ranked fourth in most affordable states in the United States. But a little bit of a caveat that a lot of people don't realize is Texas also ranked seventh highest in property taxes. So even though it's the seventh highest property tax state, it's still the fourth most affordable. And that kind of give and take right there is a reason a lot of people come. But, at the same time, since it's so affordable, everybody wants to buy a house.
Well, so that I mean that's interesting though, right? Like we're looking at some places in Austin, and those prices just keep going up, right? Like they've like doubled in the last year or something. And if the houses become more and more expensive, we're looking at a situation where somebody's net worth is more and more tied up in their house. Therefore, their property taxes, because Texas is the seventh highest property tax state, are going to be even a larger percent of their taxable income. So potentially one thing that's made Texas so affordable is the fact that housing prices haven't been San Francisco, New York levels yet.
Yeah.
But if they are going to be in Dallas, Houston, Austin, maybe that's going to
Yeah,
change.
no, absolutely. And actually, housing prices alone in Texas rank about 20% lower than the national average. And you see it all over TikTok and Instagram. There's all this like, oh, look what 350K can get you in Texas. And it's like this giant, beautiful house. And, that's the case. But like the little thing nobody really tells you is that's not really like right downtown. Right. That house is out in the suburbs a little bit. And, the other thing that's just like really interesting, as Luke kind of brought up, as your net worth increases, there's actually a study that was done by Polaris Wealth, and it found that Dallas, which is, another really hot market in Texas, is 62% less expensive to live in than San Francisco.
Oh, wow.
Like that is insane. And, to even take that a step further from a simple like cost of living analysis, if you made $1 million in San Francisco, it would be the equivalent of making 350K in Dallas. And
Where you could live on you could do the same lifestyle.
exact same lifestyle as $1 million in San Francisco and 350K in Dallas. And what's kind of crazy about that is the, average home in San Francisco is like 1.4 million. So, you're making $1 million in San Francisco, but you can barely afford a home. And so that's what's so attractive about Texas and Austin specifically. And that's why everybody is flocking down here.
Yeah, no. And how I don't know if you know too much about this, but like wages in Texas compared to a lot of those places, like I'd imagine if like, all these companies are moving down there, that's, getting inflated a bit. What has been your experience? What have you seen?
Yeah.
Um,
So, the interesting thing just about like wages in Texas and in general is, if since all these tech companies are moving, obviously like their positions are staying the same. So, a software developer that's working for, a massive company like Microsoft, their wage in San Francisco is going to be very different than their wage in Austin just because the cost of living is lower, right? Naturally, that makes sense. But as more and more tech companies move in, the competition is increasing. Therefore, they're having to increase their salaries in order to keep people around, even in Austin, where all this boom is happening. So all of those white collar jobs like that are skyrocketing, so to speak. And it's making people able to buy more and more expensive houses and properties, which is also leading to like the housing shortages in the downtown area because now everybody can afford these bigger houses in Texas.
yeah, no, for sure. And so let's think about like kind of like what you're saying, right? It's driving more and more people there. Housing market's going up. What is it looking like in terms of long-term growth? What's the growth been like, I guess, first of all, and then what can we expect over the next, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, something like that?
Yeah. So right now the median home price in the Austin area is 395K. And that is a 22% increase year over year. Now, first off, I want to be the first person to say that 22% is not maintainable in the long term, but I certainly think that double digits is. So, next year might not be a 22% increase, but it's still going to be massive. So it's still going to continue to grow. And the other thing that's really interesting, we were reading an article the other day. The last time the Austin area housing market was considered healthy, right now it is not a healthy market because of the supply and demand. But the last time it was considered at a healthy 6-month mark was 10 years ago in June of 2011. So Austin's been like this for a really long time.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, I guess I don't know. To me, Austin's always been like a very relevant place, but I guess 10 years ago, maybe that wasn't quite the case. I guess Texas doesn't have the best rep from a tech community perspective. But yeah, no, that's awesome. And so, what is like your kind of your thesis? What are you banking on in order to see that double digit growth going forward? Like, if you're going to invest, what are you expecting to happen in order to see the return that you're expecting?
Sure. So the first thing that you need to expect if you're getting into this housing market from a real estate standpoint is you're going to have to pay more money over the listing price. So even though that house is advertised for 450K, you're actually going to end up buying that house for 525, for 550. You hear stories all the time. We have friends down here that are getting outbid by like 40K and they're 40K over the listing price. Actually, in Austin, for every there are two closings for every single listing in Austin. So that's a 2-to-1 ratio. I mean, that is super hard. So in order to be competitive in this market, you're going to have to pay a little bit over, which makes sense. But the reason that all of this is going to keep going, and the reason that we have this bullish outlook on this is because Texas is going to continue to grow from a business standpoint. And, everybody freaked out with COVID and, all of these jobs. Well, last month, the Austin Metro added 6,700 jobs. And right now it has regained 75% of the jobs that were lost. So Austin is picking right back up where it left off. Obviously COVID was a little bit of a speed bump, but the city's coming back. And actually, the Austin Metro ranked as the third strongest labor market across the top 50 largest metro areas in the country. That right there is a testament to some of the companies that are coming in. And actually, we have some numbers right here that are pretty crazy. Amazon has a massive presence here in the Austin area. Believe that or not? Austin Bergstrom, the airport, is in a pretty good spot right on I-35. So Amazon's increasing their presence here, bringing in like 1,700 new jobs. Ascension, which is the third largest job provider in Texas, it's a big medical network. They're adding 1,000 new jobs, but the craziest one, and the one that's kind of all over the news, is Tesla, and that's fueled by Elon Musk's tweet last week about looking for 10,000 new jobs. And he added a little caveat to that and said that you do not need a college degree.
So do you think that those jobs then are, I guess I saw that tweet too, and I didn't look into it too much, but is that like, like programming jobs, and they're going to still be looking for people who just like were grinding away on their own and know how to do that? Or do you think it's going to be more um, like manufacturing type jobs that don't really, need any special skills?
Well, I'm going to have a little twist on that. I think it's going to be both, but I also think in a manufacturing plant like Tesla, you do have to have a skilled labor force, even on the factory floor, based on the machines that they're creating. So I think that, Austin is presenting a viable skilled labor market. And then with all of, the massive tech presence here with everybody who has a tech job, which, if you go out on the town on the weekend, you pretty much every single person out there works in tech in some fashion. Like Tesla's going to be able to pull from all of that because basically they're just coming into they're the big fish in the small pond, so to speak, and everybody kind of wants to work for a company like that. So they're going to be able to pull a lot of people very quickly.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, I think, like Apple's building something down there, right? That'll hopefully be ready. And I think big thing will be, are people going to be coming into the office? And I would guess at Tesla, they will be. I mean, I don't know if they even went home ever. But like, and Amazon's bringing everybody back.
Yep.
What about like Oracle? Is Oracle bringing people? What about, Google, other companies that have, fairly large presence down there?
I think those companies are going to slowly start rolling out that kind of, those kind of decrees. And, I think everybody was just a little bit scared, right? And they wanted
Yeah.
somebody else to make the first move. Nobody ever wants to be, first mover advantage is awesome, but like nobody wants to be the first mover in terms of sending everybody back
Yeah, I
after
think
the
that's a little
pandemic.
different than
Yeah.
the first mover. Yeah.
It's a little, but Amazon saying that everybody is going to go back on what I believe June. Um,
Yeah, hopefully by the end of the year,
June.
they said like 80% of the people will be back or something.
Yeah, exactly right. So a lot of those companies, like their culture is built off office collaboration and stuff like that. So a big giant like Amazon saying everybody's going to go back, I think is going to bring the Googles, the Facebooks, the Oracles, the Microsofts back into the
Yeah.
office and make those statements, which is going to be incredible for the city because that's going to start stimulating downtown again, which just helps contribute to the growth.
Yeah, no, for sure. And while we've, got a little bit of time left to just kind of to ramble, but I'm interested in something. So, I was reading about like how significant this Austin kind of crazy housing market is, and the kind of insane bidding wars, off market transactions, all that stuff seems like, for places like New York, San Francisco, LA, DC, like that's a fairly common thing. And so I'm wondering, do you think that as both the United States population expands and the population that's centered in some of these larger metro areas that are not in the center of the country continue kind of filling out new cities, maybe St. Louis, Nashville, Miami, New Orleans. Like, do you think this is going to be a more and more common thing? Like, people are going to be leaving the coast and seeing the value of working in places that maybe 15, 20 years ago were kind of deemed as like boring, like where I'm from, Minnesota, right? Nobody's going to work in Minneapolis, too cold, but somewhere a little south of that, right? Like, do you
Yeah.
think that this is going to be something that we're going to see over and over again?
Yeah. And, you know, honestly, as population just in the world as a whole increases, you just can't keep living on top of each other. So people are going to expand. They're going to expand west for the most part. If you look at the population center of America, it falls somewhere in Missouri. If you think about how heavy the East Coast is, people are going to start, kind of branching out, moving into areas where there's more space, where they can have a little bit of land,
Yep.
and that's going to cause cities like Nashville, St. Louis, Austin, Dallas, Denver, just to
Yeah.
name a few. Like, that's what's going to cause those guys to blow
Keep
up.
blowing up.
And then in addition to that, though, I mean, like, cost of living on the West Coast is extremely high, and people are packed on the East Coast, so they're moving to get more space. People are tired of paying a lot of money on the West Coast, so they're moving to
Come back here.
yep.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. And I think that's why real estate to me is the most exciting, investment. It's like you take any new technology and you're like, this is gonna be the future, right? Like, crypto, right? You make another freaking video of me doing crypto stuff. But I'll tell you that, like, that, if it works, great, it could be with us forever. If it doesn't work, right, people spent many, many hundreds of millions of dollars getting it to the point that it is now, and it could just all go away. But real estate, people always are going to need a place to live. The population's only growing and land isn't going anywhere. If anything, with global warming, there's less and less land. And so, like, if there's any investment that demand is only going up and supply, if anything, is going down, like, that seems like a no-brainer investment to make. It's just a matter of, can you get into it and can you wait long enough to see that through. So regardless, I'm excited to see what we can do with this. And
Yeah, no, I
yeah.
mean, I think you just hit the nail on the head. And so, the answer to the question that we had at the beginning of the podcast is 2021 a bad time to start your real estate empire and get into it? I think it's a
Never
great
a
time.
bad time.
I don't think there's ever a bad time. Also, if you are waiting for the perfect moment, right? Like, you're like, oh, I got to get everything in line for
Time
this
to
perfect moment.
market.
Yeah, yeah. Time's moving. There's no such thing as a perfect moment. Get out there and start making it happen, because it's only going to, competition's only going to increase. It's only going to get more expensive. The cheapest price that house you're looking at will ever be is today, in the short term. So get out there and
Or in
do
the
it.
long term, yeah. I mean, I think the other thing, like you just said, like, you can't really time any market, at least not one that's kind of as complex as the housing market or stock market. I was doing some random analysis, and it was like, if you missed, so if you tried to time the market and you missed the 7 best days that the S&P 500 returned over the last 50 years versus just putting your money in 50 years ago and just holding on to it, your returns are like, and you missed a lot of the big downs, but you missed a lot of the big ups too. Your returns were like 1/10 of what they would have been had you just like been like, screw it, I'm just going to put my money in when I wanted to, and just see it through. And so I guess the lesson in all of that for both what we're working on as well as just investing in anything in general is just like, when you have conviction around it, just go for it and don't worry about the price necessarily, unless, of course, Warren Buffett it. If it's absurdly expensive, don't do it. But there's not going to be a good time to just wait. So
All right. So that was a pretty wild conversation around real estate. There's a lot of things going on at the United States level. But and then when we zoomed in on Austin specifically, we talked a lot about what was going on there, and the reasons why. But I think that what we covered is applicable across all of these hot housing markets, throughout the United States. So, Luke, what's a couple takeaways you had from our conversation today?
I mean, I think the most important one to me is just understanding why prices, especially in somewhere like Austin, have been kind of going through the roof, knowing that, while it may look scary and intimidating that, oh boy, I'm getting in so much higher. If I look, a year, 2 years ago at those prices, I'm like, we're just way over that, too expensive, not a good time. No, like, there's a reason that prices are going up, and looks to be a lot of reasons why it's going to keep going up. And so, I mean, it makes me excited for, what could be to come. But what about you? I mean, what was the most exciting or a couple exciting things you took away?
Well, I think that there was a quote in one of the articles that we were doing research on, and it said, one reason that people were afraid of the 2021 housing bubble was because there might be a global recession or a pandemic or something. But what they didn't realize is that just happened, and house prices went up,
Yeah.
right? So, this isn't going anywhere. The market's going to continue to be strong. Sure, there might be corrections, but as Luke brought up, you can't time the market. There's no
point in trying.
There's no point in trying, and there's no point like the present, or no time like the present. So I think that houses are going to be expensive. You're going to have to get out there and maybe pay a little bit more than what the traditional list price or the appraisal for that property would be. But that's just a result of competition, which signifies a healthy economy. So I'm excited for us personally, with our real estate ventures, but I'm also excited for everybody at home. If real estate is something that you're interested in, I think you should go out there and do it.
Yeah, no, agreed.
Yeah. So, first off, incredible amount of support from all of you guys. You guys are blowing up our downloads, and you're interacting with us on social media. We're going to continue to put out a bunch of great content. So follow us down below wherever you consume your social media. Listen, like, subscribe, follow Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. All of these full videos are going up on YouTube along with all the clips we post on social media. So get out there and leave a rate and a review. It really helps the podcast, and we appreciate all the love and support, and we love hopping on this and doing this every week with y'all.
Yeah, keep it real, everybody.